Good evening, everybody. I'm Andy Resnick, Communications Consultant with City Hall here, and I'm sitting right here to the left of me with Mayor Derrick McDowell, and I want to welcome everybody to our first of what will be a series of virtual town halls for the city of Youngstown and Mayor McDowell's administration. So just a couple of ground rules before we start. We welcome everybody who's viewing either on the YouTube page or on our Facebook live stream right now. If you have any questions, please submit them into the comments section on Facebook and the chat on YouTube. We will do our best to get to those. What we'll likely do, if there's a lot of questions, is probably group some topics together just for efficiency's sake. And we ask that if you see a topic being brought up in the comments a lot, try not to duplicate so we can keep it kind of diverse as far as our answers. And of course, we ask for everybody's please their decorum today and just to kind of keep it clean as we go throughout moderating, trying to get to everybody's questions. If for some reason we don't get to your question today, or if Mayor McDowell doesn't answer it directly through the course of this virtual town hall, we do have some of our department heads on hand watching the stream as well. They'll be able to, some of them will be submitting follow-ups or context or answers to your questions live in the chat. If that doesn't happen, we will also be following up with every question in the next few days following the virtual town hall. We want to make sure that every question gets addressed here. So with that, I will now turn it over to our Mayor McDowell, and it's your microphone. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks, Andy. Thanks for helping us host. Thank you for everybody who made this moment happen. This moment is, it's a wonderful moment for me because it is an opportunity to make good on the promise that I made to this community while out running for this office. I'm thankful for the voters who put their trust in me to be here hosting this first town hall, one of many. I'm thankful to those who have lent their support to this administration and rooting for it to do well. In the first 6 months, we've accomplished some wonderful things that we're going to talk about. We have many challenges that unfortunately we've inherited to try and address, but this is an effort to keep the promise of being accountable, keep the promise of being transparent to this community. And we haven't gotten everything right. We know that. We don't have every answer that you might be looking for. We don't have every solution that is required and requested at this very moment. But you should know that in the last 6 months, we spent a lot of time retooling. We've spent a lot of time sharpening our skills, getting acclimated to the work that's ahead of us. And that work will produce a return on investment. Those seeds planted will have a fruit that they bear. And we're excited about what that work is. So I'd like to just jump right in. Again, thank you to those who are tuning in. And I'll turn it back over to you, Andy, to start asking me the questions so that we don't waste any more time.
Absolutely. So I really would encourage everybody who's listening right now. We have a good audience on both Facebook and on YouTube to please submit questions into those comments. And as we're waiting for some questions to come in, I think, you mentioned this is your first 6 months in office, right? We're coming up on, I think, exactly 6 months since January 1. There's a lot of questions about some of the bigger issues that are going on around town. I think SoBe is probably the biggest one in the news right now. So why don't we just tackle that one right off the bat and maybe give an update in terms of what's been going on with SoBe, what the city's doing, and what we're hoping to get out of some of the conversations.
Yeah. So I'll tell you, the other day I just used ChatGPT, and the prompt was, how many articles have been written about SoBe thermal plant in the last 6 months since I took office? The response was between 20 and 35. And so in the last 6 months, it's been a hot topic. It's been debated. It's been discussed. There is some information swirling around that some of it is helpful in sharing the challenge around this thermal plant and its impact to the downtown and our economy. And some of it has been very damaging because we're trying to have conversations on higher levels with state officials, with leaders of our community. And so if you don't know, it used to be known as Youngstown Thermal. It is one of the country's oldest district steam plants. It is privately owned now by SoBe Thermal, but it is considered a public utility. And that public utility has regulations to it. That's what the PUCO, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. And so regulating that now, this steam plant is in the second court-ordered receivership because it is not delivering on that public utility to the users, and it is financially unstable. It is on the verge of collapse.
Yeah.
And so, what probably makes it so contentious is the fact that the city doesn't own it, and yet we're inserting ourselves in trying to solve the issue. You saw legislation pass yesterday that allows us to engage some of the experts in this field to give us a strategy. It is not just a study to tell us things that we already know. What it is to say that this winter, we know we're going to be challenged with providing the most basic of humanity's services, which is heat and hot water to users. We know that if 23 connected buildings to this steam heat go down, that is our downtown. That is City Hall. That is YMCA. That is Oh Wow. That is YBI, who got a $26 million aerospace and defense grant. We simply can't sit back and do nothing. And so we've just been lobbying. I can tell you that not a day has gone by in the last 6 months that I haven't lobbied on the local level, the state level, the federal level, coming back from DC just recently. It's complex, it's a conundrum, but I won't rest until we bring resolution to it. And there's a number of different strategies on trying to bring resolution, but you won't bring real resolution without a strategy on how you're gonna solve the problem of providing energy to these businesses, whether it's steam heat, whether it's converted to something else, we don't know that yet. And so that's what makes it so challenging. So I appreciate this community's patience. I understand their frustrations with their tax dollars going to something like this, but I am tasked with a vision for this city, building back our downtown. And when you're posed with a steam plant that controls this many people's lives, you're talking residents who live in the downtown, you're talking businesses who are trying to operate out of some of these buildings, you're talking stakeholders who are literally wanting to see a healthy downtown, and this is impeding that. And so we've got to dig in, even where we're not responsible or the liable party. We are the leaders who can convene tables and bring solutions to try and fix this thing.
And I think that point was made very well during council yesterday from everybody, that the city as a convener kind of moving forward with some of these big issues, and that's kind of the precedence we're setting now. So
yeah, we're thankful to city council after many meetings, many discussions, bringing the experts to the table. Council did approve this legislation 7-0. They voiced their concerns just as much as we did about setting a precedent with this to insert ourselves in this matter. We hear that. But we're still the conveners because we're the leaders and we're the ones who are tasked with taking on the hard moments like this.
We have one question on here now that I'm sure is one question in the minds of hundreds, and thousands, and potentially the majority of the city.
Yeah.
Roads. What are we doing about the roads? And that could be anything from the potholes coming out of a really bad winter to all some the closures and repairs and infrastructure investments that are going on across the city.
Yeah. So I'll answer. We're doing what we can with roads.
Yep.
If we look at roads, this city at one point had close to 170,000 residents. We're below 60,000 at this point. So I'd like to say we have way more city than city residents. And when you take those, let's just call it an even number, 60,000 residents, about 22 to 25,000 of them are taxable. So let's just round it. That's half of the people who live here are taxable. That's because there's some folks who are of the age that they don't get taxed, whether it's 17 and under, or there's some folks who are seniors who don't get taxed. So we only receive so much revenue to take care of roads. And so the challenge is that we need to stop the population loss, we need to increase our tax base, and we need to get much more efficient about how we deal with a city that's much larger than what we presently need. And so we allocated $1.5 million to road resurfacing. We go out for grants that allow us to do a little bit more and stretch that money. Our public works director is very aggressive about that and his team. So we were able to amass a couple of more $1 million, close to $4.5–5 million that it's going to go to road resurfacing. We do partnering with other agencies like the county that help us to get projects done. We just bought some equipment. It's called a hot box that allows us to go out and do more patching now, even in the cold months, because the asphalt companies are closed down in the winter. They don't open back up till the spring. And so you have a harsh winter like we just had. You come out of that, roads froze, they thaw, potholes create, the asphalt company's not open. You have cold patch that doesn't last long. We're investing in the equipment needed to really address that. So we hear you. You can report those things to us. We have an app called See, Click, Fix that can be downloaded whether you have a smartphone, an Apple iPhone from the App Store or the Google Play Store, and you can take a picture of that. So if you can see it with your eyes, you can click it with your phone, you can submit it and we'll fix it. So See, Click, Fix will help us identify. There's also some technology that we've invested in that can be mounted to vehicles like trash pickup vehicles that allow us to begin to digitally map our infrastructure so we know well in advance the condition of roads. And so that technology wasn't afforded to us previously. We had ways of trying to map where roads were becoming issues. We're going to have much more technology that gets us ahead of some of this. And so what we need is your patience, right, as a community. We need to increase our tax base because it's money that fixes roads. We need to stabilize and grow our population, but we also need to understand our infrastructure for an aging city like Youngstown will continue to plague us if we don't get ahead of some of this stuff using technology, using some of the equipment. And there are shortages in workforce as well that make it difficult. One quick thing though, and again, I use technology to help me understand some of this stuff. I went to that same AI tool, ChatGPT, and I put in, what does $1.5 million get you for road resurfacing in a city like Youngstown? And it spit back that Youngstown has approximately 1,100 lane miles of road. And if you dedicated $1.5 million to that 1,100 lane miles of road, it gets you about 4 to 8 lane miles of resurfacing. So it's expensive.
Yeah.
And so 1,100, and only 1.5 will get you 4 to 8 lane miles. We need a lot of investment to really address this.
On the topic of roads, before we move off, there is a lot of concern out there with what's going on with 680. And the concern that it's almost kind of choking off downtown a little bit, that access points are being cut off. Can you just maybe go into that a little bit, explain whose jurisdiction is actually 680, why it's being done, and really where there are some other avenues to be able to get people downtown for all the events we have coming up in the summer?
Absolutely. It's a concern of all of ours. You look at gas prices, look at our economy. Nobody wants to be redirected. Nobody wants to be driving further to work, confused about detours and which way do I go. We understand that, and it's probably a love-hate relationship because sometimes when we see construction, we see it as a deterrent. We see it as a negative when really we should be looking at it as progress. But quite honestly, we've gone through this so much with construction that it's become a pain point for us. And so I hate that we're at that point. But if you look at 680, it has an I in front of it. I-680 is an interstate. The authority is the Ohio Department of Transportation. They proposed this project some years ago. They opened up public comment somewhere around December of 2024. They gave the community a window of time to give them insights that would help them and assist them as they plan this project. Typically, you do that for a 30-day window. You can go on ODOT's site and see all of those concerns in public comments. There were a lot of people who brought up the same concerns that are happening right now. And ODOT mitigates those from safety service forces that brought up concerns, fire departments, police departments, residents, business owners. And here we are, 2 years later, and we're talking about, we're in it. I took office and they were already on 680 working. And so what we have to do is our best to try and coordinate with ODOT to find out how they're moving, which ramp closures are occurring, and how do we use folks like Andy and our events coordinator, David, to privy our community using the best channels that we have to tell you, hey, a road closure's happening here. I say it to folks, this is not some experiment where you're being trapped in your own city. Some of it is county work, And some of it is city work, where you see South Avenue Bridge. Our bridges are required to be maintained or closed down or demolished in some instances. And so the county has that responsibility. And sometimes their schedule doesn't match with the state's schedule, doesn't match with Y Live or our concert series. It's truly unfortunate that our folks are suffering, but I will tell you that this should not be seen as just a pain point. It should be seen as a progress point for us, because 680, 6 decades, I don't know the last time, 60 years, right? And so we pray that when this phase 1 is done and they move a little bit further, away from Youngstown, it's going to impact other communities when they start heading towards Boardman and those places. And we're going to feel for those communities, but right now we're feeling the brunt of it. But when it's over, I pray that our community sees that investment is going to position us as a community that is going to use its access points to its advantage, because we know Youngstown is very well situated geographically, and being able to get in and out of this city to live, work, play, do business, and attract folks here, we're going to need smooth roads, as we talked about previously on local resurfacing.
Absolutely. Moving to a different topic right now, there are obviously a lot of legacy projects that kind of came over through the transition of administrations, one of them being the bottom dollar on Glenwood. So that's been in the news recently. We have a question in terms of what is happening with the old bottom dollar. Is there an update on that? So anything you might want to talk about today?
Yeah, these are moments where new laws come out in real time, and so oftentimes, unless you have an agreement in place, you can't mention folks' names. That is not a lack of transparency, that is law. If you're going to work economic development deals with organizations that haven't been contractually entered into agreements, you can't use their names. And so we have an economic development team with Domain Kitchen, community planning and economic development director, who has stayed on top of the bottom dollar. We know that through the Port Authority, that the Board of Elections has interest in that. They are still evaluating the property, making sure that it can meet the needs of the Board of Elections. Simultaneously, though, we're still working internally. When you have city-owned property, there are only so many mechanisms by which you can expose this property for opportunity, like sale or lease. And so we're still trying to allow the Board of Elections time to evaluate the property, but shortly thereafter, we're considering whether an agreement through the Port Authority will be called upon, or we'll be looking at a request for proposals to publicly put the property out for bid and allow others who are interested in it to come to the table, propose something that could be a use of it as well. And so that's one of those careful spaces where we are working. There is an entity that has known and expressed their interest through the Board of Elections, but there are other entities that have, unofficially expressed interest as well, and we have to allow them time to sit and decide where we're going to go from here, if it's going to be a public request or it's going to be an agreement through a Port Authority or something of that nature.
Absolutely. We get a lot of feedback on, and even as somebody who lives in the area, you look at our city and say, well, why can't we be more like Pittsburgh? Why can't we be more like Cleveland? We have a great riverfront down here. There's been some investment into it recently. We have some questions on here in terms of why, what is the future of riverfront development in our area? Is it something that we can capitalize on? Can we be like Pittsburgh and kind of put some of our infrastructure underground to further development, further development down there?
It was interesting. I asked if someone was very familiar with Pittsburgh and why they got the name Steelers, and someone said, no, I don't know why. And I go, well, there used to be a steel city. And I said, did you ever look at the Steelers logo? And she goes, oh. And so what was evident was that the history of Pittsburgh, though they don't sort of disavow it, it is not so prevalent to people in today's world, because Pittsburgh has more than diversified themselves with university, with tech, with sport, major teams and those kind of things that really help you mask what Pittsburgh is known for, because it's so diverse. In Youngstown, we're still very much known by our past, that same steel city, and we haven't moved past it. I was in D.C. Late January. They had a session, and it was labeled U.S. Railroads, and it was a room full of those organizations. And I walked in and I said, where is CSX and Norfolk Southern? Because we have a riverfront, and it is active rail lines that impede our entry to the river on both sides of the river, not just on one side. So we have a much more unique situation than even what's going on in Lowellville, in Campbell, in Struthers. As you move up that river going towards the Newton Falls, Warren area, they don't have the same challenges. And so there are heavy easement agreements. There are deep federal laws around rail lines that you just don't get to have your way with riverfront development when you're impeded on both sides by that. So the reason I asked for those two organizations is because they're the ones who typically own those lines. Even the fact that Norfolk Southern is potentially merging and being bought out by Union Pacific could drive more rail line traffic to the city of Youngstown. We need to have discussions with them now about how economic development could be brought back to the city of Youngstown if we could reach some kind of agreement with them. Land bridges, things that get us over the rail lines safely using modern technology and architecture that will not impede us, but keep us safe and keep us access. You do see investments in the near B&O with the Spring Commons Park that's being redone now. If you didn't know what that construction was, community, that's what that is. And so you'll have boat launch and a dock down there and a viewpoint that gets us a little bit of access to that river. But imagine if you had that access around the Penguin City breweries, the Youngstown Fleas, which is a near riverfront property, the Cavelli Center, Ween Park, the amphitheater, along those lines. That gives us the boardwalks. That gives us the hiking, biking, walking trails. That gives us future development opportunities to live near that water. It's a challenge because of the rail line, but it's something that I'm already working on and trying to figure out.
Talking about downtown, regardless of what we do with the economic investment and the development downtown on the riverfront, you have to have a reason for people to come downtown. How important is it to have a diverse series of events that are happening consistently downtown and that the city's consistently funding, events to bring people downtown?
Yeah. I think right now you'll find that a lot of the traffic that we are getting downtown is very specific. We've done studies to show that over 1 million visitors come downtown and they go through YSU's campus. So they're a vital component to our downtown. YSU puts on events like Federal Frenzy through their Penguin production. So it's a student-led music event. We had hip-hop artist Armani White come through here. Sometimes the rain and weather doesn't cooperate with us. You've seen YSU bring their homecoming parade downtown. You have a Juneteenth celebration, week-long events that's been going. We're going to be doing a parade that's coming up here tomorrow in the downtown, a cultural event that we need to get around and celebrate that makes us feel comfortable in our own space. Youngstown's just as black as it is white. You see as many Hispanic festivals as there are now. We want to make sure there's a good representation of culture in our community. I had a YSU student who's Pakistani. We just got off a Zoom call and she brought up the same topic about diversity in our downtown, making sure these events are representative. So we went out with our Yo Nights, we engaged businesses, and we asked them to pair themselves with local artists, and we will give them access to the amphitheater to put on a night just for them. So it is not only benefiting those businesses and trying to put some money in their pockets, but allowing them to engage the community with local bands that they think will draw folks down here and be diverse. We know there's larger events like Y Live, what goes on in the Cavelli Center that are vital to our community because they're an economic driver for us. They fill up the hotel. There's the bed taxes that we need to collect. There's debt service on these facilities that we need to pay. But there is still opportunity to make sure that we're seeing the community as a whole and making sure these events. Now, I don't like attaching a race to any event. What's a white show? What's a black show, right? Or is there entertainment for us all to consider and decide for ourselves? I'd love to come down and see the Youngstown Symphony. And I don't care what you are. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what your gender is. We need to support these organizations. The Butler Museum provides opportunity for entertainment just as much as Oh Wow does with Silly Science Sunday. And, we have so much we can offer through all these different organizations. We just need to, as a community, understand that there's more here. And we are resource rich. Sometimes we're connectivity poor. Getting the word out, we're working to do that through folks like you and, again, David, We have communications to get out to this community about what is here. And we also need to turn around and listen to our community about what they want to see here and figure out a way to bring it.
Speaking of listening, we've been getting a lot of feedback about Animal Charity of Ohio.
Yeah.
It's been in the news recently. Obviously, the recently cut animal control services for the county, citing lack of public funding. We have a couple of questions on here asking when the city's going to fund Animal Charity. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Even during my campaign, I toured, Animal Charity's new facilities out on Southern Boulevard. I'd gone to our dog warden, Mahoney County dog wardens on Industrial Road, had conversations with, it was different leadership then. And so they are under new leadership now. We actually had a meeting with that leadership sometime in maybe February, March. They brought us a proposal to look at some funding. What we needed to get through then was their transition in leadership, and that we had given some funding to animal charities through some of the American Rescue Funds to do some spade and neutering in our 7th ward. And so their proposal at the time came on the heels of a transition in leadership, as well as funding that had been given to them that we hadn't received deliverables on as of yet, and they were beginning that process. And so I can't go to city council and ask for additional funding for animal charities when we had allocated funding through the American Rescue Funds, and we still needed those deliverables. Now, they're in the process of working through those deliverables and spading and neutering. Some of that is the weather, some of that is a lot of variables in their transition with leadership and staffing. And so we're happy to work with animal charities and those who are out there doing the work. We also need to talk about responsible pet ownership in our community to reduce the need for some of this demand. We need to talk to our community and say to them that there are tethering laws, there are leash laws, and there are resources to make sure that we're taking care of pets. The county and I have had this conversation with commissioners to see how we can come alongside with this new information that we've been given about their fiscal standing. But those are ongoing conversations. So I can't tell you that we have a solution to it yet, but I can tell you it's on our radar. And we are going to use things like Bort's Field that's just gotten redone recently, that has a dog park in it now, to host events, to show folks what it means to have responsible pet ownership, to have resources in the community you can turn to. We want to bring out the veterinarians. We want to bring out the places that can provide you, the collars and the tagging and the spade and the neutering. We need to get those things under control. So it's education, it's enforcement, and its support of organizations. All those things can help us. But first, we need to talk about what can we do to alleviate the need to spend so much money taking care of the problem. And that begins with going back and educating, and then moving into more aggressive enforcement of it. And then we can go back and make commitments to our community partners about what we can do to financially support them.
Want to talk real fast about Northside Pool.
Yeah.
There was obviously an incident there a few weeks ago. We've had some comments on the Facebook live stream right now just about not feeling safe to take their children there for the summer. So what is the city doing to help ensure the safety of the residents who want to visit the pool?
Absolutely. Talking with our parks director, that incident occurred outside of the pool. And so it's very challenging to operate the pool and control the environment around the pool as the employees working at the pool. And so that moment, it was a moment where we need additional coordination with law enforcement, and we've brought that to the table with YPD. Making sure that we're sending additional patrols around those spaces. We also have to address the fact that those incidents occur when there's a lack of oversight with our youth in some instances. And so policies need to be reinforced that when you're underage, 17 and under, that you can't just be dropped off at the pool, that we need waivers, we need emergency contact information, we need to know who these folks are that are enjoying the pool, so that if we have an incident like this, we have record of who we can go after to hold accountability to them as well. And so policy, procedure, enforcement, those are things. I get it when people don't feel safe. We can say that crime is down. We can say that violence is not occurring at the rate that it used to, but the feeling of safety, that I can confidently come and enjoy these spaces without all of this nonsense, is something that I understand and we work on deeply. The community initiative to reduce violence through Guy Burney and his team, they're engaged in these things because we want to make sure we're not just, going out here and arresting kids who are behaving in the way that they're behaving now, that we're engaging them and trying to figure out what is really going on. I'll tell you quite honestly, and I shared it on my social media post, I myself was driving past the WRTA bus terminal and broke up a fight of kids, engaged in a fight. And I said to them, how long will we continue to come to these public spaces and exhibit this behavior, scaring other folks off from places like Dior that are right next door? And what I pointed to was I had just left a boxing match at Penguin City Brewery. And I said, hey, I don't know if you enjoy fighting or if you're good at fighting, but I know a sport that can really put that to the test, to see if you could use your hands someday to be the next world champion boxer that we're talking about from the city of Youngstown, instead of being the people that I'm going to have to lock up using Youngstown police. And the police arrived, and I looked at them and I said, hey, I'm at City Hall. You can come talk to me. But if you continue this nonsense behavior, you're definitely going to continue to see our Youngstown police who are going to engage you and make sure that this behavior doesn't continue. So whether you're at the pool, whether you're at our downtown bus terminal, whether you're at anywhere in our communities, we as a community have to address our youth and making sure that as parents, we're accountable to knowing where our YPD is not, we're not babysitters. And so we have to understand that that creates an additional burden when we have emergency calls for the community in other ways where crime is occurring, where parents should be taking accountability. Our police officers are having to take accountability, and that puts additional burden on us. So, we are responding to the Northside pools and the WRTAs with additional law enforcement, with additional coordination from, social service agencies, working with the district. They're bringing back busing that should help alleviate some of the congregating density of our youth in some instances. But we need our community. We need our partners with parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles. There are many, many, many youth organizations working out in our community to engage youth as well. And so we don't want to shy away from pointing to them and saying, if you don't know what to do with your kids, reach out to Guy Burney and the Community Initiative to Reduce Violence. And that's for parents who want to do the right thing with their kids, and sometimes our kids are unruly. They're not listening to their parents. And then there's some parents who are just not taking accountability for the behavior of their kids. And you can put them into youth programs like Cool Boys, like Inspiring Minds Youngstown, like the Boys and Girls Club, like the YMCA. If you need assistance in figuring out what to do, help your community by reaching out to the city and letting us point you in the right direction.
You had mentioned public safety. I just want to touch on some of the initiatives that are going on downtown. Yeah. Obviously there was an announcement about the Downtown Safety Initiative. I think a lot of the business owners and stakeholders downtown met to talk about safety initiatives. There's some activity going on with the parking lot that the city's undertaking. Maybe touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, trust me, we hear it quite often that, YPD, what are they doing? When you have a city the size of Youngstown, again, when we talk about the amount of infrastructure that our safety forces have to patrol when it comes to fire and police, there's more city than more city employees. And so, YPD is one of those entities that you could tell me that we are too large in our safety service forces based on some state audit, and yet we're too small for some folks because they want to see more police, more patrols, more. And so we started a cadets program to enhance our recruiting efforts prior to them reaching the academy, and making sure that we're converting folks over to the force as fast as we can to get more people out on those streets. But the answer isn't always law enforcement. The answer in some instances is us engaging, like you said, in business meetings and solving a parking lot that's been problematic with congregating patrons at the end of the night, 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. That's exacerbating our law enforcement officers because they're responding to the same issues over and over and over again. And so we have started Impact Initiative across the city that'll run all the way through the summer into August. That brings in all kinds of community partners when you're talking about sheriff's department, the state, federal, government, FBI, That's a partnering organizations that are going to help us deliver on not only the downtown being safe so that we can enjoy things like America 250 and our Ignite the Night, but the pools on the north side and the plazas that exist in all across our communities. And so it is a struggle to have a force that maybe is seen as too large for the city of Youngstown based on some auditing, but too small to really address the size of a city. It's a balance that we've trying to strike, and we can also help solve that by remediating a lot of the issues that keep us going to some of the same places and same spaces and tying up our safety service forces. So we're asking the community. There's Crime Stoppers. Again, there's Community Initiative to Reduce Violence. If you're in an emergency, call 911. But there are some people we don't want to admit that are haphazardly dialing 911 for service requests that exacerbate our safety service forces, and they could call a non-emergency number. Please use that as well. And then there's times where these calls aren't warranted at all, and they get in a queue and they bog us down and they take us into spaces that draw us away from places where we need to be going. Youngstown City Schools, when it's combining, it's going to have to address safety service forces for itself. And we're looking at partnering with the district to figure out how we can make sure that that wonderful unification that's going to happen is a safe unification for bringing high schools together and bringing middle schools together. So, those are challenges that we're going to have to solve in addition to the challenges we already know that we have.
Absolutely. We have a question on here about slum landlords. And, if in a lot of the neighborhoods, there's a lot of vacant homes, boarded up windows, and it just looks like out of town property owners just aren't doing anything to maintain their properties, and obviously it's bringing everybody else's property value down. Just a bad look for the city in general. Yeah. What is the city doing to address that issue?
So Mike Durkin, code enforcement, those are the entities that are responsible for responding to these kinds of things. We just had meetings recently where we talk about, there is no way in our American society that we can stop the private market from buying up property. Folks have the right to purchase property, whether they're out-of-town investors, whether they're in-town investors. We have good actors and bad actors in both cases. We've got homeowners that are good homeowners, and we've got, homeowners that are bad actors who are not taking care of their property. So it exists in a number of different spaces, but rental properties seem to be the area where we struggle the most. What we need to be encouraging our community is to buy up their own community before out-of-town investors start coming in here and taking our property. So what did we do? We offered through the city our at-home program, which is down payment assistance. You have credit counseling services through partnering organizations like Youngstown Neighborhood Development Corp. But when it comes to rental property specifically, we're looking at rental registration, because if you're going to rent a property in our city, you're supposed to go through a rental registration process to make sure that these properties are not only rentable based on code, but they're being taken care of by responsible owners. We also, in that at-home program, retooled a landlord revolving loan fund. So the city's invested, $2 million set aside to allow landlords to come in and enhance their properties so that we can make sure we're doing our part to say, you need to be a good landlord, but if you're struggling to be a good landlord, we understand that. It is your property, you should take care of it, but we can come aside with a tool that gets you a loan that can help bring your property up to code. But we need to hold these out-of-town landlords as well as in-town landlords accountable for these properties, and we do that through the help of block watches, neighborhood groups, again, See, Click, Fix, and our code enforcement department. And we're going to be ramping up some staffing within that code enforcement department to get out here and address this a lot more. And community partners like YNDC have brought those things to the table. So please don't hesitate to bring it to our attention if in your neighborhood you believe that there's a rental property that's a bad actor, and we will investigate through our code enforcement. Again, you can report that through See, Click, Fix. You can call directly down to City Hall and talk to our code enforcement. We have code enforcement agents that'll come out and again, hold us accountable if we're not responding to those requests.
Economic development across the city. We've heard, over the last, or really yesterday, about Survival's closing just outside the city limits. But there are, struggles to attract larger employers into the city and bring that large employment base here. There's effort across the board. There's a united effort with a lot of the economic development ecosystem that's out there. What is the city specifically doing to ensure that we're an attractive location for large employers who are looking to come to our area?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things I would say is, and folks may not understand this, but it's a tangible to me, it's reclaiming our identity. And so when I talk about reclaiming, that word means taking back. Someone has our identity. And that means that economic development can be held up when we don't have full control of who we are and what we're about and what we have to offer people who are thinking about investing in the city of Youngstown. So who had our identity, or who has our identity? Well, we know the steel mills, that was a large part of our identity, and we cherish that and we honor it, but we can't stay in that identity. We can just use it as a foundation to launch ourselves off of. Who else had or has our identity? The mob. There's still an active group of people out there who would welcome the mob back to our community. And every time I say that, quite honestly, on the social networks, it goes crazy because people saw what they considered organized, that behavior that the mob brought organization to our community. It brought jobs. It brought, economic development. It brought infrastructure. It even brought entertainment here. You saw large entertainers would come through the city of Youngstown because of the amount of money that was being traded during that mob period of time. And so that's the organized side of things. But if you look at the other side, it was called organized crime. What were we giving up? What was the cost of that organized crime? It was racketeering, bribery, it was car bombs, it was drug, activity. It was a lot of things that were negatively associated. And coming off the heels of that, we turned into Murder Town, USA. And so if those continue to be our identity, who would want to bring economic development opportunities to a city like Youngstown? And so if those can no longer be our identity, then people will ask, well, what is our identity and who are we? And part of our identity, I would tell folks, is that we've always been entrepreneurs. That is what brought us the mills. And so what we're working on through economic development is helping folks to lift their business acumen, to be better business operators and business owners, to take the leap, to have the right to start a business in the city of Youngstown and see it thrive. And so we have partner organizations like Carmela Williams with Intentional Development Group who are contracted to go around and help lift the business acumen of our community. We're working in-house. We have the CDBG funding, we have HUD funding, we have grants that folks get through facade improvements for commercial properties as well as residential properties that we've used. We're working on figuring out how to keep that funding going because some of that was American Rescue dollars. What else is a part of our identity that is not just entrepreneurship? Because we know the great equalizers for our community, I believe, are education and entrepreneurship. So we can really help turn the city around with those things. But what else is a part of our identity is we have always been athletes. And I believe if we start looking at our community from that perspective, in today's world, it's called sports tourism. And that can really begin to open up things here if we look at the infrastructure as well as our personalities and our character traits. 5 world champion boxers. We have a hockey team here. We have the university that have athletics all on it. You have little league teams all over the place. Athletics is something we need to really, really look at. And what else is a part of our identity? Well, arts, entertainment, culture, and family. And we talked about a little bit of that with what's upcoming for some of the events going on. But if we really want to be talking about economic development, then we really need to look at what we have in the way of arts, entertainment coming. Let's run it down, really. Dana School of Music, Youngstown Symphony Orchestra, Ballet Western Reserve, Butler Art Museum, Smarts, Oh Wow. I mean, the list can go on and on and on and on. The Playhouse. And so if we take a look at that and become regionally renowned for those things, start working together to really leverage that as an economic driver beyond what it's currently doing, then we can start talking about the fact that not only is Youngstown the place you want to live, but it will begin to draw in folks to visit and consider relocating to as well.
I want to talk just for a minute about data centers. That's
Yeah.
obviously a piece of economic development.
Sure.
It's been in the news obviously a lot lately.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so, I've seen surrounding communities. I think one of the first ones was Lordstown. They had some folks submit an application to bring a $3.2 billion data center to their community. And you have to realize that if your zoning allows for an application like a data center to be submitted, you have to consider it. And Lordstown was one of those communities that an application came in, it fit within their zoning, and they weren't prepared for it, I believe. And so their council really tried to get a handle on it by imposing a moratorium. You saw other communities react to that, I believe, and I don't want to misquote any other communities, so I'll leave that. But some of the additional surrounding communities begin to say, hey, we need to get ahead of this as well. Right now, in the city of Youngstown, our zoning is being looked at to make sure that we know where we're at if a interested party came our way, if we were in control of our own land, our own property, our own water, our own electrical infrastructure. And so these conversations are happening right now. We need ordinances to be changed. We need zoning codes to be changed in order to make sure that we're ahead of it. It's controversial, and as a mayor, I've been to Columbus, I've been to DC, I've been to conferences, I've been to local presentations here to help us understand data centers. I know, for example, Mayor Doug Franklin, their council was after an all-out ban, and he requested if they were going to do something, limited to a moratorium so that he could continue to do the research. McDowell is, I believe, in talks of getting a data center. What folks don't understand in some instances is that even if the city of Youngstown never gets a data center, we can be impacted by surrounding cities having a data center because it's still using the same infrastructure. It's still using the same electrical grid. It could still be using the same water sources. And so I will tell you right now, we're definitely making sure we're getting ahead with investigating our zoning right now and making sure that we know if we need to create a new classification in our zoning to make sure data centers know where they can go and where they can't go, and they're not going to be dictating the conversation to us. If the city of Youngstown would ever get a data center, it would only be us dictating the terms and not those terms being dictated to us. I'm not a knee-jerk yes to a data center, and I'll tell you honestly, I'm not a knee-jerk no, because what data centers are offering to people these days, they have social benefit. But these are dangerous conversations because when people hear that, they're going to go, this mayor is about to sell us out to a data center. And I'm telling you, absolutely not. There was a communications company that wanted to put a cell phone tower on a parcel on the east side. And I drove there myself, got out of my car in this suit and tie, and walked that neighborhood well before I would ever give a yes or a no to a telecom community about putting up even a cell phone tower on our east side, because I wanted to see what was around the parcel that they wanted. And what I saw was a neighborhood, I saw a church, I saw a community, and I know that sometimes these things bring easement agreements that will limit future development. And I said, no, we won't sell that parcel. And so this is probably going to elicit a lot more rain down on my head, but we're educating ourselves. We're making sure we understand what other communities are going through, and we're trying to get ahead of our zoning and planning right now to make sure we dictate whatever comes to the city of Youngstown, not just a data center, but anything.
Really quick, I just want to go back to attracting businesses to the city and your statement about entrepreneurship. If you are a small business owner in this city, where can you point somebody to go within City Hall for resources that are available to them?
Yeah, I would tell you to start with our community planning and economic development team, whether you reach out to the director, Domain Kitchen, whether you reach out to Stephanie Gilchrist. You can find all of their information on the city's website. I don't care if you call City Hall's front desk and talk to the secretary. Shoot us a message on Facebook or Instagram or however you reach us. We will point you to the right directions. But I'll say it here now, too, that there are community resources you can point to as well. There are banking institutions that put on clinics all the time. There are folks like Youngstown State University's Williamson, College of Business that have resources inside like SCORE. You can reach out to Valley Partners. They've been a wonderful, trusted organization that we use quite frequently to help us with business acumen and helping lift folks. Again, Carmela Williams with Intentional Development Group. I made a post and told folks you could use AI tools, right? If you said to ChatGPT, give it the prompt that says, I want to start a nonprofit in the city of Youngstown, engaging our youth with activities that keep them off the streets. How do I start that business? Give me 3 actionable steps. I guarantee you that AI tool is going to kick back the results that you need to begin. And if you need assistance beyond that, we're happy to help.
Since we're on the topic of economic development still, Chilcan and 20 Federal, 2 big projects that are still out there that your administration inherited. So just maybe a status update on each of those projects and if there's any vision as to where you want to go with them.
So folks know, we did claw back the Chilcan plant, had to buy it back from a sheriff's sale. What folks don't maybe know about that was that we won a judgment from the previous owner, the Mitchell Joseph Company, and that judgment is what helped us claw back the Chilcan plant. And so that money was not a wasted investment. It was not a purchase of the Chilcan plant back from him. It was a judgment through the courts that allowed us to bid and win it back through sheriff's sale. So both properties are city-owned properties. We have what's called an MOU agreement with the Port Authority that allows us to go out as the city as well as a community partner like with the Port Authority to solicit folks who want to take a stab at redeveloping those properties. If you see recently, we just had a open house with the Chilcan plant to not only give the community an opportunity to see inside that space, but to also share their frustrations, share their ideas with us, but also to elicit some economic development interest. And so we had some folks who, showed interest. No official proposals have been taken on those properties as of yet. There are some interested parties we're trying to court back who were previously ready to redevelop these, and it's still an ongoing effort. But those are behemoth projects. The 20 Federal Place, if you recall, the initial development attempt at that project was somewhere around $74 million. A second company tried to come in and look at 20 Federal Place and propose something around a $54 million project. That resulted in them wanting us to subsidize their losses until they right-sided the project. We can't do that as a city. And so now what we're looking at is the building in its present condition, both of them, the Chilcan plant and 20 Federal Place. And we're opening it up publicly to let folks know that these are within the city's possession. We do have a partner in the Port Authority that's out there seeking folks to redevelop it as well. And we don't presently have an answer to what that looks like, but we are still working to make sure people know this is a place where we are ready to do business and we are ready to redevelop a 20 Federal Place. We are ready to make sure that a Chilcan plant gets used productively. And I say whatever we put in these spaces, they must delight the community. That is the standard that I'm looking for. It can't be just something that we stick in there just to say we've got a project. I have worked to create a war room in sort of sense around some of these projects, bringing in Lake to River, bringing in Jobs Ohio, bringing in the Port Authority, bringing in the regional chamber, bringing in local developers. We sit and have sat on a monthly basis to try and talk about who we can bring to the table in a reasonable manner that can help us redevelop these things in a responsible way.
We have a couple questions on here just about WRTA routes.
Yeah.
Asking who's responsible for expanding the routes in Trumbull County.
Yeah.
Can you just clarify for everybody in terms of what our jurisdiction is within?
WRTA, is not within my authority as the mayor of the city of Youngstown. It's not within the administration's authority. It's not with city council's authority. They're a body that Western Reserve, Transit Authority, and so routes, I believe, and I don't want to speak improperly for them, are often determined by volume and need. So they see a community and they say, hey, there are so many people that we can service by creating, for example, a fixed route on Market Street. And that route will take you from downtown Youngstown all the way into Boardman, for example. If ridership decreases on that route, for example, then they have to go back and reevaluate whether or not that route still serves the community. I know funding can be limited, and so they had expanded into Trumbull County and were providing some services there, and that funding exhausted and it wasn't renewed, and so they had to end those routes. They constantly, I believe, reevaluate each route, and I believe that you can request that WRTA consider a route if you believe that there would be enough ridership to justify it. So I would tell folks to reach out to Dean Harris directly at WRTA and tell them that there is some need for a route in my neighborhood, my community, my street, or a fixed route that you're interested in having a discussion with them about.
We have a very specific question here regarding property acquired through a sheriff's sale, and are there any resources for damage done to that property by the fire department, and any resources for helping getting it up to code?
Sure. You know, I believe I know this specific scenario. I won't, call anybody's names or point to the specific properties. I'll speak generically. I believe there was so we have properties that are acquired through the land bank. It can be acquired through the city's land bank or the county's land bank. There are times where a property, a structure might drop in value and more taxes are owed, and it winds up being taken by an entity and placed in sheriff's sale. There are some times where there is a drop in the ball in coordination where it's reached sheriff's sale, but it's also on a demolition list. And so working through the city, working through a county land bank, working through the sheriff's department to make sure that that ball drop doesn't happen. That if a city says this property is set to be demolished, that it's not on a list to be sold at the county level through a sheriff's sale. And what happened in that instance is our fire department, who needs training exercises, called up within the city, right, and said, hey, do we have anything on the demo list that we can do a training exercise on and a roof ventilation project? And it unfortunately was an incident where at the same time this property was listed on the demolition list and given to the fire department as a plausible place to go do this exercise. It was listed on the sheriff's sale. And so it's an unfortunate gap of communications that we need to figure out where that ball was dropped. But it impacted a real resident, right? Because this resident wanted this property. And I'd love you to have it, right? Nobody's objecting to someone who wants to invest in a property that that somebody actually wants to turn around and redevelop and put to productive use. What we find ourselves is, I think the sale wasn't completed through the sheriff's sale. And so that means that this person doesn't technically own that property at this point. And so the question is, do you still want it, or do we need to remedy the roof scenario so that it can complete the sale? So I would encourage that person specifically to reach out to us and express interest and let us know, hey, I do still want this property, and we can look at remedying the issue that was caused with our fire department. But it was completely accidental, and those things happen. It doesn't run around happening all day long, but we need to make sure we coordinate better between city, county, sheriff's sale, and demolition list.
We did talk about bottom dollar very briefly at the beginning of the town hall, but obviously bottom dollar and that discussion brings up Village of Healing.
Yeah.
We got close to having Village of Healing into the city. There are a couple of questions on here that want to know what's the status of those conversations. Are they going to look at other locations in the city? Is bottom dollar still an option?
Sure. I just want to be careful in this scenario because, when you use folks' names, right, these things wind up in the paper. And that was part of one of the issues, is that the more we repeated that company's name, the more they felt assaulted. And they released a statement about, continually having a conversation about them. And so I'm not shying away from speaking their name. I just don't want to cause any more injury, because oftentimes these are reported in a negative manner. I inherited many issues. I inherited a desk that didn't have many files regarding some of these negotiations. So when it came to this bottom dollar and this specific tenant, I went on the hunt looking for anything that would tell me some of the previous negotiations that were had, whether there was a draft document, whether there was a discussion had that I wasn't privy to or aware of that we could get a hold of. And, for me, I couldn't find that. And when that didn't happen, I reached out directly to Village of Healing and had a conversation with them myself. There is still an appetite to see them come here. Absolutely. There is an appetite to see, infant mortality reduced. But then you've got to get down to the real bare bones of if we're going to have any tenant in any building in the city of Youngstown that we own, we've got to have real negotiations about what the lease agreement is going to be, what the tenant is going to be responsible for, and what the city is going to be responsible for, who's going to oversee that tenant. But I did just run into some folks who are very interested in still seeing the Village of Healing. They were previous donor organizations. And again, I won't mention their names, but they were ready to support that institution and organization. And then even our own health department and health commissioner, Aaron Bishop, had a heart for this, not only her, but tons of people. But you have to get down to, as we seek to provide quality of life services to our community, there are still real negotiations that have to be had. You can't just bring a tenant in to a building without having some agreement. And we didn't have one, and we're making attempts to try and figure out what the appetite is to revisit that. But that's relationship building that we've got to do with that tenant. And I don't think it's done in any way, but I can't tell you that it's, on the verge of happening either, because, I've been here 6 months. There are very, very pressing issues, including infant mortality. And not all of that lines up with our schedules to make it happen overnight. There are long conversations where we've got to go back to previous donors who are interested in supporting this effort and see if they still have the appetite. There's people who are going to have to come to the table and talk about what we can afford, whether subsidies were involved in play, and see where we're at. Because again, at the time some of this was proposed, you had American Rescue Funds available. I, in my administration, have 0 American Rescue Funds within my control. All of that had to be allocated by December of 2025 and has to be spent by December of 2026. And you cannot, without Treasury approval, alter the use of some of those American Rescue Funds. And so I don't have the negotiating tools that they had when these original projects were proposed in some instances that allow us to maybe subsidize some of this and bring it in, or consider reducing rates that allow that to happen. We got real bills, real expenses, and real folks who we need to partner with, who are going to ask us real difficult questions about each and every tenant that we try to bring into a city-owned building, whether it's for sale or whether it's for lease. You've got a lot to work through. So we would love to have an organization here helping us work on infant mortality. Easier said than done. I hope this community can see.
Just on the, because Village of Healing serves as a safety net function in the city in terms of addressing some of the poverty issues that are across the city, and we do have a couple questions on here. You had mentioned it in pieces in some of your answers about economic development and public safety, but just maybe to tie it all together in terms of what the city is doing to address the poverty issue that goes, across the city. I have a feeling that your answer is probably going to be around, it really is all encompassing. Everything we're doing drives towards that issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think at one point, and I'm not sure what the numbers are, but you look at the rate of poverty in the city like Youngstown, and it's something around 34%. And that's well above the state's average and the national averages. Median income for a single family, $34,000, I believe, in this community. And so that's not a lot of money. What are the drivers that help lift us out of poverty? I could tell you for my own family, what helped lift me out of poverty is some of the things I talked about. Entrepreneurship, that helped me greatly. Starting my own business and bringing in that income into my family helped. Not everybody's an entrepreneur, though, I get it. And so looking at workforce development, making sure that we're looking at the trades, making sure that the Schaffens are front and center for our kids. My own son pushed him towards Pittsburgh Institute of Aeronautics out there at the Youngstown Air Base. He's through a 16-month program that is going to, at the end of it, put him in position to be hired by airlines paying $60,000 to $75,000. That will change the economic dynamics of my family in 16 months if my son is able to successfully get through that program. So entrepreneurship, buildings and trades, those are things. When we talk about what plagues us beyond that, though, it is the fact that sometimes in a city like Youngstown, we have to be retrained for today's world. And that's why I talk about reclaiming our identity, that we're not steel workers. And if the steel mills came back, we'd probably be very challenged with our present residents, some of them aging, and some of them don't know that world as the youth of today, who probably wouldn't go into a steel mill and give their life away 40 years to that. And so all of that has to come into play. Our mentality and what we think about ourselves, our workforce, and the skill set that we're, acquiring to be ready for the jobs of the future. When we talk about, again, bringing and attracting people who are going to bring businesses here, and we're still buttoning up some of the things that I'd love to share with folks right now on some of the jobs that we are going to be bringing to the city of Youngstown. We're just this close to announcing some of that already within the first 6 months. But it is all-encompassing, man, when I think about it. And I'll tell you, one of the other pieces that really changed the economic dynamics of my family is real estate, land ownership, owning our home, having a pride in it, building the equity of it. How many of our residents are thinking about the value of their property? How many people are thinking about what it can do for them when they get in an emergency? That if I have a vehicle breakdown, that I have equity that I can pull out of a home and go out in an emergency and purchase another vehicle or get the repairs needed done. I ran into a friend of mine in one of our housing projects. On the side of her car, she had a sticker that said she was an Amazon delivery driver. And she told me her car was broke down. And I said, well, how are you going to get it repaired? She's living in one of our housing projects where she's renting. So you have no equity in your home. You have no way to accommodate the transmission bill that she's about to get. And that car was her actual livelihood as an Amazon delivery driver. And so that's why I impressed upon her to make sure we understand that we need to move you. And it sounds crazy, from renting and living in the housing projects, which is nothing wrong with that, but only for a period of time. We need to help you climb that housing ladder so that you can get to home ownership. And that home ownership could help you in an instance where your vehicle is broken down, right?
On the topic of home ownership, really quickly, there are resources available for residents in the city. They have been available for some years.
Yep.
Your administration, I think a couple of months ago, updated those
Yep.
those resources as well. So maybe hit on
Yeah,
that.
again, going back to that at-home program, within that, there was money for facade improvements. There was money for down payment assistance. Previously, the numbers were about $10,000 for down payment assistance. We bumped that up to around $15,000. Now, I will warn people right now, those were based on American Rescue funds, and they are very limited. And so we have some of those programs that have been exhausted at this point. We're looking at ways to, again, renew them, but that would be coming off the city's general fund at this point. So that gift that we got because of the pandemic of COVID was $82.7 million, and it did not last forever. But it did help us really see over 250 people become homeowners in the city of Youngstown by taking advantage of that. There were some energy assistance improvements that you could make with your home. I believe, again, you go back to it, we had set aside $2 million for landlords who owned properties to make improvements to their home. So I won't tell you exactly where those numbers are at and what's remaining in each one of those funds, because I don't want to open our community's appetite and get them all upset at me. But I would tell you again, that program is housed within our community planning and economic development department, and they should reach out right now to John Noga. Again, you can go to our city's website. You can reach out to, again, the director of Domain Kitchen, or even Stephanie Gilchrist that can give you more information about that. But that is for a reason, because I said it on a social media post. Nobody washes a rental car. Why? Because they don't expect you to. There's no stewardship of a rental car other than return it where it's not damaged so I can get my deposit back or whatever, you know what I mean? And that it doesn't hit my insurance for an accident. But when it's your car, when it's your community, when it's your home, it has value to us all collectively, and it has value to you individually when it comes to helping us lift ourselves out of poverty. So education, entrepreneurship, right? And we talk about property ownership in our community. Those are things that can really help us improve our financial conditions when it comes to being a low income or poverty community.
I want to hit on this just because it came up right as you were talking here, but just to make sure people have the correct information.
Yeah.
Property tax relief for seniors.
Property tax relief for seniors is not within the purview of the city of Youngstown, right? I know there's an initiative to get that on the ballot through the state. That's one of those areas where you can go on the Mahoning County Auditor's site and put in your own address. You can see what your property taxes are. A lot of folks say these words to me, well, what do my taxes go to? It'll give you the breakdown of where those taxes are being allocated. You'll see those taxes going to safety service forces like fire and police. You'll see some of it go to the MRDD and social services. You'll see some of it going to the school district to support it. But we collect property tax through the county, and it's dispersed from there. That is not something we can control. What people are very familiar with is our income tax, which we know to some folks has been a deterrent for some people. But I guarantee you some people are going to be rethinking how they pay for some of those city services in areas where the only thing that they collect is property tax to support some of those safety services, schools, and social service agencies. And so not within my purview. And quite honestly, I don't know if I said publicly on my social media at all before, our income tax is largely what drives and supports the city of Youngstown. I believe the number was somewhere around $55 million that we collected in income tax. I went and talked to the county auditor, Ralph Meacham, prior to coming into office and then a couple of times after office. And he said you could spend your entire term trying to figure out property tax for the city of Youngstown and collections and he says it's your income tax that you really largely rely on. So Youngstown is not largely reliant on property tax as it stands. And it would be a lifetime of trying to figure out how to balance our present needs with a city this large as it pertains to property tax.
Going into income tax just a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Because we are so reliant on the income tax.
Yeah.
And all the projects and initiatives that you've spoken about, especially with ARP money going away, are going to rely on some sort of tax revenue to be able to help fund it. How much of a challenge is it for the city to collect the income tax?
There's folks who asked me when I was running, are you going to reduce the income tax? Well, those are ordinances that are written. We use Regional Income Tax Agency. We like to call her RETA, right? And they do the collection for us. Some people may not know that RETA, by ordinance, if you have an estimated income tax debt of over, I believe, $200 or $250, you're supposed to make prepayments on that. And so as a business, I had to learn that, right? That the money I generate as a business in the city of Youngstown, owning a building in our downtown, if I'm estimated to owe more than $200 or $250, I don't wait till the bill comes. You're actually required to make advance payments to get ahead of it because we had such a problem with collecting those taxes that they wanted to let you know earlier. You were going to owe, again, that $55 million that we collect. I wanted this community to know whether you agree with it, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, approximately 50 million out of the 55 million is generated by people who don't live in the city of Youngstown. Right? Hear that. 50 out of 55 million are largely based on how well we can continue to attract people to come visit, to come work, or live in the city of Youngstown. And right now, they're not living in Youngstown. They're just often working in Youngstown and visiting Youngstown. There are employees of employers who work here, who don't live here, but have to pay that income tax. And so I do not want to ever see us disparaging folks who come to the city of Youngstown, who largely drive a lot of our revenues for income tax. But we still need to, as I go back and talk earlier about growing our tax base with people who do live here, who do work here, who do invest in here. And right now, again, the current residents, if we wholly relied on the 60,000 residents approximately that live here, only 22 to 25,000 of them are taxable. And that puts us in a very challenging position. And so when you see entertainment that comes to the city of Youngstown, I understand that it might not be entertainment that represents us as a whole, but that entertainment does draw folks in here that help contribute to that income tax. They help contribute to a bed tax. They help contribute when they come and work here but don't live here. And I would never disparage that, but we can't rest on that either. We've got to figure out locally how we begin to put a tourniquet on our bleed out of our population, stop that bleed, and begin growing back residents who want to live, work, and invest here.
Can you touch real fast on some of the initiatives the water department has undertaken? There's obviously the huge interceptor project going on at Mill Creek.
Yeah.
There's the lead replacement project going on. There's a lot of commentary about rate increases.
Yeah.
So just, I'm sure a lot of folks have questions that may or may not have come on to the comments yet.
Absolutely. One of the things I found interesting was that some kids from one of our local elementary schools in the city had written me some letters. I got out my letterhead and wrote each and every one of those kids back individually, packaged it all up, and took it back to the front office of this elementary school. And upon delivery, one of the secretaries began yelling at me about the water bill that she had just received. And some of the security guards came over and was just like, hey, what the heck's going on? And I'm like, no, let her have her moment, right? But what I had to explain to her was, we're not seeing our utility bill. And if you notice the difference, it no longer says Youngstown Water. It says Youngstown Utility because it's made up of more than just your water bill. On that utility bill is rate increases for sanitation, for waste treatment. Those are things that when we have an aging city like the city of Youngstown, we are under a $150 million consent decree. What that means is that the U.S. EPA has come down and said, if you're going to continue to provide water as a utility, your infrastructure is outdated. It's no different than if you're going to deliver packages for Amazon, your car needs to run well. Well, if you're going to provide water service, not only to the city of Youngstown, but a lot of the surrounding suburbs get their water from the city of Youngstown, then the vehicle by which you do that is this waste treatment plant. How you treat that water matters. And if the EPA finds issue with how we treat that water, they could either shut our plant down or require upgrades to be made. Well, in order to fund those upgrades, go back to how many residents are here. How many water customers do we have? And what are those rates that we have to charge in order to make sure our plant doesn't get shut down? Well, for, I believe, since 1998, the original number that the EPA came back with was $350 million. And it was a battle for decades to try and get the EPA to see that we can't afford that and it might be excessive. Some of the capacities they wanted to have for sewage treatment. And that's where you see the Mill Creek Interceptor project. That project is meant to address a combined sewer overflow. What does that mean? It means they have these little things that capture sewer water, and when they get full, they overflow. And when they overflow, they were dumping into the lakes in Mill Creek Metro Parks. And the EPA came calling and said, you must address this now. I believe with myself and my finance director, we signed one of the largest loans of his tenure here, and probably of my tenure here, to address that project. That was about a $30 million loan with something like $24 million in interest. Can you imagine that size and scope of a project and where we get the money to pay that back? It's unfortunate that it's on the backs of the current water customers. So it is not how many times you've showered today. It is not how many times you've ran the dishwasher. Water consumption is only one portion of your utility bill. And we know that we get our water from the Meander Reservoir. So the MVSD is what we call it. And they have a $80 million dam project that they need to address. And guess what that's going to do? It's going to disperse that cost onto us, where we buy bulk water from MVSD, and they're talking about potentially rate increases that are going to drill down to customers. And so that's why when we talk about economic development, and I'm only saying this, and I know people are going to kill me for this when I say it, is that I've literally been to communities where a data center has saved their infrastructure because they negotiated a deal where that data center came in and invested $125 million into their budget, and they were able to go out and build back infrastructure. I am not saying that's what we're going to do. I am not saying that data centers are right. What I'm saying is, if our residents are going to foot the bill themselves, we are never going to get where we're going to try and fix the issues of a city that's aging right in front of us for decades on end. And if we're going to solve these bigger problems that require $30 million loans and tax our residents on their water bill, we're going to have to come up with a different approach to it. And it's why I'm so focused using our community planning and economic development team as an engine. Hear me clearly. I did not say I'm selling us out to some data center to fix problems and ignore all the issues that come along with what we're talking about around data centers. I'm just using an example of a real community because I sat in a conference of mayors, and there are some cities that have 57 data centers. There are some communities that one data center helped them fix huge problems within their community, brownfield sites and those kind of things. And so I know that's a dangerous topic to even broach, but I get it, and we're going to have to figure these difficult scenarios out.
For any folks that have questions about quality of water, hot or cold water that may or not be, that, they might have issues getting, can they call directly to the water department
Absolutely.
and find that out?
Yeah, our water commissioner, Harry Johnson, folks on the east side. It's less populated on the east side. It's one of the least populated sides of town. There's a lot of distance between homes, and those pipes don't get as frequently used. So you might hear residents saying to you, hey, we've got sometimes where there's brown water. What we're working on through the water commissioners is to look at the water zones and connect pumps together that move water more efficiently, that help when we treat this water with the necessary chemicals to keep it clean. If stagnant water sits there, it comes out as brown. We need to get that water moving. But what we really need on the east side is investment and development and residential housing and commercial opportunities that utilize that infrastructure more to get that water moving. And so we're putting some fixes in there now to try and address it. But what we're really focused on is the economic development that'll get that side of town moving to address some of those issues like water quality.
We have about 5 minutes left. I want to give you a chance just for some closing remarks. Before we go into that, I just want to remind everybody that if we didn't get to your question today, I believe we tackled most of the questions. If not, I apologize for missing any. But if we didn't get to the questions today, we will be following up with some of those to everybody via email, as well as doing our best to respond to the comments individually throughout the comment section and YouTube section. So thank you again for your participation, everybody, today. Again, if we didn't get to them, we will not leave you unanswered, and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can, either on the social media channels or from one of our department heads here. So anyway, just in closing, Mayor, you have talked a lot about transparency, a lot about accountability, community engagement as being the hallmarks of your administration, and certainly over the course of the first 6 months and into the next 4 years. Can you talk to that about how important that is to you as you continue through your term as mayor, and what that means to help transform the city?
Absolutely. And thank you, Andy. Thank you for all those who, offered up questions. I'm going to turn to the people now and look directly in their eyes and say to them that, as this city's mayor, this town hall was important. We didn't shy away from difficult questions. Notice that we brought up data centers in a time where it is very controversial to even say those words. But notice that we talk about that the commitment that I made to this community, you can ensure that I'll never sell out our community for investments that don't belong here. You can ensure that the commitments we made to transparency, they are at the forefront. That is why we're hosting the first of many town halls. That is why I do 5 minutes with the mayor. That is why City Hall is being retooled to make sure that our department heads and our many employees, over 700 people who work for the city of Youngstown, see this as prestigious employment, who take it very seriously, because out of City Hall flows the quality of life that belongs to this community as they work hard and invest their tax dollars here. They deserve a return on that investment. We are talking about and addressing the issues around crime and safety, things that are going to bring better lighting to the city of Youngstown, things that are going to bring better patrols to our communities, reordering how our patrols are done. We're talking about and making sure we bring a solution to our Youngstown City school districts as they talk about combining the high school and the middle schools, bringing support around them. But as a mayor, making sure that you can find good education in the entire city of Youngstown. We're not shying away from these conversations. We're not shying away from the difficult things when we talk about potholes, street resurfacing, grass cutting. We're not going to shy away from Sobe thermal plant, which is impacting our economy in our downtown. We have to head on these difficult situations together. And I'm praying that each one of these moments, each one of these town halls, each time I visit your block watch, your neighborhood group, your community association, each time I come to your faith organization, a church, a temple, a mosque, whatever, that it's building trust, that you can look at this mayor and catch him at the same grocery stores, the same gas stations, driving the same roads, experiencing the same frustrations around 680, going around the bridge project on South Avenue, making sure that I'm still getting where I need to go because you are calling on me. I'm not going to let anything keep me from getting to you all. And I pray that you won't let anything keep you from getting to me to make sure that I hold my word of being accountable to you. And I'm going to hold my word of you being accountable as well. That is the two-way street that we're trying to create here. I promise you that if you reach out to the city of Youngstown, that we are doing our best to make sure we're responsive, that we're responsible, and that we are a city that can be trusted, that can be seen as worthy. The people here should know that I love them, that I work hard for them each and every day, that already in the first 6 months, we will have some wonderful announcements to make. We have already done wonderful things. Maybe you don't know all about them yet, but extra, read all about it. This is not the same Youngstown. This is not the same as it was. And I refuse to allow the narrative to be told by anyone else. That is why I work hard at reclaiming our identity. That is why I know that when we focus in on the entrepreneurial spirit that will help build back this community, that is why I know the arts, entertainment, culture, and community and family needs to be regionally renowned. That is why I know that our personality, that our athletic prowess is something that has value to this world when we talk about sports tourism and bringing folks here and supporting our local youth. I know the frustrations. We've inherited some challenging things, but I'm promising you now, we're going to work through them together. If you will join me, because there are folks who believe that this work only belongs to me, and I'm here to tell you now, I'm not going to quit asking you all for your help in making sure that this is the Youngstown that can be loved, that can be visited, that can be lived in, and that can be valued and appreciated. So thank you all. Thank you for each and every question. Thank you for every vote. Thank you for every bit of confidence in the work that we're doing. And I look forward to the next time we meet. So thank you, Youngstown, for believing in me and the work that we're doing.